The movie began with an ex-soldier named Barabbas and his lovely wife named Rebecca enjoying the night. Soon a group of feral people led by Quantrill arrived and began harassing them. Quantrill tied Rebecca to a tree and whipped her back, and with that horrific memory, Barabbas woke up in a prison cell. A prison guard entered the cell and informed Barabbas that the Colonel Havers was expecting him. Barabbas was brought to Colonel Havers, who introduced General Craven to Barabbas. Colonel Havers asked Barabbas what he knew about Fort Defiance, to which Barabbas replied it was central to Confederate supply of coal and quartz. General Craven told Barabbas that the mentioned fort was equipped with long-range guns and cannons that were pointed at them. Then Colonel Havers asked Barabbas to lead an expedition into the fort and destroy the firearms there. Barabbas refuses to head the expedition, but when General Craven read a letter from President Lincoln stating that President had absolved him of all charges and he and his slave men would be handed over to their 40 acres of land if he led the mission, Barabbas still didn't change his mind. So Craven read out another letter which he signed himself. He told Barabbas that he and his slave men would be put to death for striking an officer and showing cowardice in the face of the enemy. With no other choice, Barabbas prepared his team consisting of 6 members, including himself, and set out to infiltrate a Confederate fort hidden deep in the Arkansas wilderness. Blunt revealed to his comrades that he heard that men were scalped and tortured to death in that fort. No one had ever gone in and come out alive. It was said that the devil himself was too afraid to go inside. However, Barabbas ignored the bone-chilling hearsay and marched toward the fort through the wilderness. On their way to the enemy fort, Barabbas and his soldiers witnessed a massacre. The lady survivor told Barabbas that the Yankees had arrived and stole their silver and food. Cuffy brought a Native American girl named Sula out of the hiding spot. She told Barabbas that she killed some of the assailants and hid in the shed. The lady told Barabbas that they were scared of bad juju that lived in the woods. Bad juju appeared at night and took people away, but Barabbas didn't believe her and continued to the fort after telling Sula to return to where she had come from. A few Confederate soldiers spotted Barabbas and his team in the woods, so they started circling them, unaware that Barabbas had already watched them and sent Washington to deal with them.
What the hell is next? Bullshit. Man, let me cut this flow.
Washington and Blunt captured a Confederate soldier and brought him to Barabbas. Meanwhile, other Confederate soldiers appeared out of the woods and fired at Barabbas, commanding them to drop their firearms at once. Hap Rawls, the head of the Confederate soldiers, shot Stevens to death on the spot, striking fear into the hearts of the rest of the soldiers. Next, the Confederate soldiers beat other soldiers and hung Cuffy from a tree, trying to kill him. Meanwhile, by hiding in the forest, Barabbas fired a bullet at the hangman, causing him to release Cuffy. Soon, a brutal confrontation erupted between the enemy soldiers and Barabbas. One of the Confederate soldiers bit Washington in the hand in the struggle. However, Washington knocked him over and shot him to death. Blunt was gravely injured during the battle. So Abe approached and checked on him while Barabbas kept pointing his gun at Blunt. Before long, he blew Blunt's head off, assuming that he was about to be turned into something very dreadful. Afterward, he and the rest of slave soldiers carried on with their mission to infiltrate the Confederate fort. They stopped by a water body and made a plan to sneak into the fort. Barabbas told Abe that he had to cut the telegraph wires so the enemy forces couldn't send for help the moment they reached there. Just then, their plan was interrupted by the sudden presence of Sula, who kept following them and arrived there. Barabbas gave her an apple to eat, but Sula already had 2 hunted rabbits to roast and asked them to join her. Barabbas quickly accepted the offer and ate the rabbit. Sula asked Barabbas how he had ended up in the army and what his story was. Barabbas replied that his story was the same as any other slave's. He then flashed back to when Quantrill had captured him and his pregnant wife. Barabbas begged Quantrill to show mercy to his wife, but the brutal Quantrill did not listen and killed Rebecca. Sula took a flower from a Judas tree, on which Judas was said to have hanged himself. Abe told her that Judas's blood had turned all the white flowers pink. Then Sula explained that it was said to ward off evil spirits. Washington peed in the canal, and suddenly the dead body of a Confederate soldier emerged from the water. Cuffy examined the body and concluded that it was bitten by a wolf. But Sula didn't agree with him and said that no wolf went for the neck and left the rest of the body. Barabbas speculated that maybe the man had fallen off the cliff and the wolves didn't have a chance to finish him off. Next, they left the body and marched toward the fort to finish the task. It became dark on their way to the Confederate fort. Abe sensed something around him and looked around but could not see anything besides smoke and bats in the dark night. Barabbas and Sula found the fort in the distance, lightning with torches. Barabbas turned around only to see that Abe was missing. He, Cuffy, Washington, and Sula began searching for him in the woods. Cuffy found Abe's gun on the ground and showed it to Barabbas, explaining that Abe's footprints suddenly disappeared at one spot. Soon, they heard Sula scream and rushed over, only to find Abe bleeding on the ground. Not long after, Abe died from excessive bleeding. Washington was furious and suggested to Barabbas that they abandon the mission since only 3 of them were left. However, Barabbas stood his ground, unwilling to quit the expedition. He told Washington that he wanted his 40 acres of land back and would get it at any cost. After the heated argument, they left Abe's body in the forest and headed back to the fort. Barabbas scanned the area through binoculars and spotted a squad leaving for patrol. Hence, seizing the chance, Barabbas and his remaining soldiers snuck into the fort to blow up the guns and other firearms. Inside the fort, they discovered a man lying helplessly in a corner. Barabbas quickly checked on him and found him lifeless. However, the very next moment, the man woke up in panic and grabbed Barabbas's water bag. The captured man quenched his thirst and told Barabbas that his name was Lieutenant James Williams, Army of the Frontier. Barabbas asked him how he ended up there, to which Williams replied that he was on a mission with his infantry, but the nefarious animals living in the fort killed all of his men. Williams told Barabbas that the rabid creatures captured them down the river and kept them alive. They tortured them, and on top of that, they did some kind of ritual by hanging his men upside down and piercing his men's neck with a liston knife. Meanwhile, Washington began to act strangely in the back, and shortly after he attacked Williams while he was describing his painful story, Washington began to feed on Williams' blood, revealing that he had turned into a vampire. Cuffy rushed over to save Williams, but the vampire form of Washington attacked him and began to smother him. Barabbas struck him with the gun and then shot him, knocking him down. Barabbas and Cuffy were shocked to see this side of Washington. Sula told them that Washington had transformed into an evil spirit named Hustradu that haunts by night and feeds on people's blood. Although Barabbas didn't believe it and called it superstition.
Keep your goddamn superstitions outside.
Just then, the door slammed shut on its own. Sula nervously approached the door, pushed it open, and found no one beyond it. Soon, Washington resurrected and attacked Barabbas and Cuffy, attempting to infect them.
Feed on this.
Before Cuffy could retaliate, Barabbas lunged at him, driving a stake through his heart, eventually killing him. With this encounter, Barabbas was convinced about the existence of the evil spirits that everyone had been talking about since the beginning, and asked Sula to shed light on it. Sula explains that the Hustradu are ancient spirits that came over from Europe, with the white skins around 300 years ago. Legends speak of ships reaching the ports up north, with nothing but rats surviving the journey. Legends say the rats could take on many forms, shifting their shape, but their spirit animal was a bat. Terrified, Cuffy suggested to Barabbas that they must abort the mission as they were not dealing with any ordinary being but evil spirits. Barabbas, again, refused to change his mind and prepared to kill the bloodthirsty creatures. Grabbing stakes and guns in their hands, Barabbas, Cuffy, and Sula headed out to search for the telegraph wires to cut them off. Cuffy reached upstairs to blow up the cannons and other guns that were directly pointed at the American bases. Barabbas began to install bombs in the fort, preparing to explode it unaware that a vampire was lurking around him. Up there, Cuffy was scared by a shadowy figure that forced him to descend into the basement. Sula snuck into a cabin and snapped the telegraph wires and kept some letters in her bag. After that, she moved to escape the cabin, but encountered a vampire outside. She desperately tried to break out of the window, but the window was too strong to be destroyed. Panicked, Sula spotted a trap inside the cabin. Seconds later, the vampire burst into the cabin and fell into a trap, losing his life. Elsewhere, Barabbas encountered a vampire and attacked him with a stake, but the vampire easily overpowered him. The mighty vampire beat Barabbas black and blue. Shortly afterward, Barabbas fought back and managed to stake the vampire's heart. Although the vampire remained unharmed and claimed to be immortal, he pulled out the stake and began to stalk Barabbas, who fled the battlefield. On the other side, Cuffy was attacked and stabbed by a lurking vampire. The vampire bit Cuffy and tore apart one of his arms. The immortal vampire called out to Barabbas, who showed up from the back and taught him a lesson by staking his heart, insanely killing him.
Killing folks is thirsty business.
Afterward, he entered the vampire lair where many vampires were sleeping soundly in their coffins. Soon Sula arrived. Barabbas removed the dust from one of the coffins and learned that the vampire inside had been living there for 400 years. They soon sensed someone approaching, so they prepared to face the incoming danger. Not long after, Quantrill appeared, leaving Barabbas speechless, as Quantrill was the one who had killed his pregnant wife that night. Quantrill revealed to Barabbas that his wife and son were still alive, leaving Barabbas stunned.
That's close enough. Before you do that, I wonder if you're aware of the still alive. Yeah, you're bluffing. Fuck you, you're bluffing! Well, you know, there's some things a man... You killed us 6 years ago. You're right about it.
He's lying, Barabbas.
Sula warned Barabbas not to believe Quantrill, claiming he was bluffing. Despite her warning, Barabbas fell for Quantrill's words and fired at Sula as she moved to kill Quantrill. Later, he surrendered to Quantrill in hopes of finding out the truth about his wife and son. A minion of Quantrill moved to suck Barabbas's blood, but just then Sula arrived and repeatedly stabbed the minion in the head before cutting off his head. This revealed that shooting her was part of Barabbas's plan. Barabbas then asked Sula to burn all the coffins in the lair while he went to settle his score with Quantrill. Sula followed his instructions and doused the coffins with gasoline before setting them all on fire. Quantrill was at his house, enjoying liquor when Barabbas arrived. Suddenly, Quantrill got up from his chair, lunged at Barabbas, slammed him into the wall, and bit him on the arm. Barabbas retaliated by stabbing a large stake into Quantrill's heart, making him collapse to the floor. He then drove the stake deeper into his chest, killing his archenemy. However, during the struggle, Barabbas was infected by the vampire's bite and collapsed. Just in time, Sula arrived and applied the essence of the Judas flower to his wound, then lit it to cauterize the infection. The Judas flower healed Barabbas instantly, giving him new life. Afterwards, Barabbas climbed to the top of the fort and blew up the artillery. A few minutes later, the entire sinister fort exploded and turned to dust. Barabbas returned to his land and entered General Craven's tent, who was surprised to see him back. Barabbas placed a canvas on the table containing something inside and demanded that Craven return his 40 acres and mule. Craven asked if Barabbas had blown up the guns, to which Barabbas replied affirmatively. Before leaving, Barabbas issued a chilling warning. Craven must vacate his land immediately, and if he or his men were ever seen on it again, heads would roll. Barabbas came out of the tent and told Sula that he would now go to find his wife and son. General Craven opened the sack on the table and found a vampire's head inside. At last, Barabbas managed to find his wife and son and reunited with them after a long time.